I wonder what happened to this little piggy.
Don't play with the food.
The late 70s through early 90s produced a strain of horror comedy so bizarre that studios had no idea how to market them. These films mixed genuine scares with absurdist humor in ways that shouldn't have worked, featuring 13-year-olds shielded from their own twist endings, Oscar nominees treating cannibal comedies like Shakespeare, and former adult film stars risking everything just to prove they could act in a nurse uniform. Felissa Rose was only 13 years old when she was cast as Angela, and the production went to extreme lengths to protect her from the film's provocative nature. A shy girl traumatized by a boating accident that killed her family is sent to Camp Arawak with her cousin, where brutal bullying triggers gruesome murders culminating in one of horror's most shocking twist endings. Rose's mother was on set every single day, and when director Robert Hiltzik wanted Rose to perform the kill scenes herself, her mother refused outright, fearing psychological damage. The killer's hands throughout the film actually belonged to various crew members, which unintentionally preserved the mystery. For the infamous final shot, they used a local college student in a prosthetic mask instead of the 13-year-old lead. Shot in just 5 weeks on $350,000 at a former youth camp in Argyle, New York, the film was behind schedule after day one, but Hiltzik finished using meticulously planned storyboards. When United Film Distributors released it in 1983, the film earned roughly $11 million at the box office, returning over 30 times its investment and spawning 3 sequels. Before she was a household name on Friends, Jennifer Aniston nearly lost her breakthrough horror role because she refused to dye her hair blonde. A vengeful leprechaun trapped in a crate for a decade launches a murderous rampage to recover his stolen gold from a group of house painters, using magic and tiny vehicles to hunt down anyone he suspects of having his coins. Trimark Pictures demanded Aniston change her natural light brown hair to fit traditional horror aesthetics, but she flatly refused, and director Mark Jones had to fight executives just to keep her on the project. Warwick Davis took the role during a career dry spell after Willow, spending 3 hours in the makeup chair every morning and another 3 hours removing prosthetics at the end of 12-hour days. Davis stayed in character to keep his energy up, which genuinely unsettled his co-stars. And in a 2025 interview, he revealed Aniston was actually terrified of him because the makeup was so intense. Originally developed for direct-to-video with a $900,000 acquisition price, the studio spent $4.5 million on advertising after seeing the finished product. The gamble paid off with over $8.5 million domestically and massive VHS sales. The credits for Student Bodies hide a massive conflict involving some of Hollywood's biggest comedy writers trying to create the first true slasher parody. A mysterious killer called The Breather stalks high school students using absurd weapons like paper clips, while an on-screen body count ticker tracks the carnage, forcing prime suspect Toby to unmask the real killer before prom.
There's been another double murder. The killer is among us.
While Mickey Rose is the sole credited director, legendary filmmaker Michael Ritchie was brought in as overseeing producer and ended up co-directing much of the film uncredited. The 1981 Writers Guild strike forced Ritchie and executive producer Jerry Belson to downplay their contributions to avoid union fines. What makes the film even stranger is that its star, Kristen Ritter, essentially vanished from Hollywood after its release, despite being the lead in a major Paramount production that earned $5.1 million on a $500,000 budget. Student Bodies remains her only credited film role, and most of the cast never appeared in another feature. The mystery deepened with Malvert, the creepy janitor played by a man credited only as the Stick, whose unnatural movements were so convincing viewers believed the production used puppetry. The screenplay was originally written by celebrated feminist author Rita Mae Brown as a biting parody of the slasher genre titled Don't Open the Door, mocking damsel in distress tropes and phallic villain symbolism. A high school senior throws a slumber party for her basketball teammates, but an escaped mental patient armed with a massive power drill begins systematically killing the girls in a night that becomes a desperate fight for survival. When producer Roger Corman bought Brown's script, he insisted on playing the violence straight to capitalize on the 80s horror boom. And director Amy Holden Jones admitted she felt massive professional burden as a woman directing a film requiring gratuitous nudity to secure funding. Michelle Michaels, who played Trish, suffered multiple bruises and minor cuts during basement scenes because the $250,000 budget meant no stunt doubles. The film's villain, Michael Villela, stayed in method character between takes, genuinely terrifying Michaels during grueling night shoots in a cramped house that became slick with sticky fake blood. Despite Roger Ebert calling it despicable, the film grossed over $3.6 million, becoming the first horror franchise where every single installment was directed by a woman. Director Fred Olen Ray shot this film in just 5 days on roughly $35,000, using stolen locations across Los Angeles and filming in alleys without permits before fleeing when police arrived. A private investigator tracks a runaway teenager to an ancient Egyptian cult rebranded as chainsaw-wielding prostitutes who lure men into gory ritualistic sacrifices, forcing him to use his wits and a bit of luck to escape their clutches.
What's in this suitcase?
24 inches of fun.
The production couldn't afford professional fake blood, instead using Caro syrup and food coloring that attracted swarms of bees to actors during the hot summer. Linnea Quigley performed the iconic chainsaw dance in a cold, dusty warehouse, wielding two real heavy chainsaws that leaked gasoline and oil onto her bare skin. The weight of the saws left her barely able to lift her arms the next day. Casting Gunnar Hansen, the original Leatherface, was a marketing ploy that nearly didn't happen because Hansen was trying to distance himself from chainsaw roles, but the production offered him a significant portion of their remaining budget for just a few days of work. Despite its $35,000 budget, the film grossed hundreds of thousands in rentals. When Tourist Trap was first released in 1979, it barely made a dent at the box office, grossing less than $1 million and seeming destined for obscurity. A group of friends become stranded at a defunct wax museum run by the lonely Mr. Slauson, only to discover a masked killer with telekinetic powers is turning victims into permanent wax-covered exhibits in a surreal nightmare where the mannequins seem to be watching their every move. The film's legacy was saved when Stephen King praised it in his 1981 book Danse Macabre as an underrated classic, specifically noting the mannequin scenes achieved a level of eerie supernatural dread that most big-budget horror failed to reach. This King bump moved the film from obscure failure to cult masterpiece. Casting Chuck Connors, the beloved star of The Rifleman, as the villainous Mr. Slauson shocked 70s audiences, and Connors stayed in high tension on set, often scaring younger actors during rehearsals to elicit realistic terror. The moving, screaming mannequins were the result of creative desperation, using stop-motion light techniques and live actors in masks standing perfectly still until the moment of the scare, with dental acrylics and human hair creating a pervasive chemical smell that made the cast nauseous. The production of Nightmare Sisters was essentially a dare after director David Decoteau finished shooting Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama and had leftover equipment and film remaining. 3 nerdy college students accidentally summon a demonic succubus during a seance, transforming them into hypersexualized bloodthirsty monsters that their awkward frat boy dates must exorcise using instructions found in the Yellow Pages.
I think what we need to do is contact a church or a synagogue, or something like that.
Rather than return the gear, Decoteau shot an entire second feature in just 4 days on a microscopic $40,000 budget, filming in his own rented Hollywood home with colored gels over lights and posters from his previous movies taped to walls. The film's primary selling point was the rare triple threat casting of Linnea Quigley, Brinky Stevens, and Michelle Bauer, but the actresses had to handle their own hair, makeup, and wardrobes. Shortly after its 1988 release, the distribution company Trans World Entertainment went out of business, and less than 2,000 original VHS copies were ever distributed before rights became mired in legal limbo. The scarcity turned the movie into a holy grail for tape collectors in the 90s, with original copies selling for hundreds of dollars. The most haunting fact about Slaughter High has nothing to do with the on-screen kills, but rather the fate of its lead actor Simon Scudamore, who played the disfigured revenge-seeking Marty with a vulnerable intensity critics noted was too real for a standard slasher. A shy, brilliant student becomes the victim of a cruel April Fool's prank that leaves him permanently disfigured, and 10 years later he invites his former bullies to a class reunion at the abandoned high school to hunt them in education-themed murders. Scudamore committed suicide via drug overdose on November 21st, 1984, just weeks after production wrapped and 2 years before the film was even released. Despite American football jerseys and high school lockers, the film was shot entirely in England on roughly $2.1 million, and the cast was a mix of British actors attempting mid-Atlantic accents and actual Americans, creating a linguistic mess. The film's score was composed by Harry Manfredini, the legendary musician behind Friday the 13th, but producers asked him to reuse musical cues from his previous work, leading to the iconic whispers during scenes featuring the Jester Killer. Long before she became the conservative Charlotte York on Sex and the City, Kristen Davis made her professional film debut playing Jane, the nerdy bookworm who spends the entire movie in a bright blue leotard, delivering dialogue about the bourgeoisie while her friends are slaughtered. A disfigured lawyer who was mistakenly declared dead and nearly dissected turns an abandoned asylum into his killing floor, targeting teenagers and an all-girl punk band, using the grounds as a practice space. Davis was a recent college graduate who took the job for the paycheck and has famously avoided discussing the film despite her death scene being considered a highlight. The film's authentic grime came from shooting in the condemned Essex Mountain Sanitarium in Verona, New Jersey, which was provided free because it was scheduled for demolition. The building was filled with peeling lead-based paint and crumbling asbestos, forcing the crew to shoot in just 10 to 12 days. Because the $90,000 budget couldn't afford lighting equipment, director Richard Friedman filmed almost the entire horror movie during bright daylight. The final girl was played by Patty Mullen, a reigning Penthouse pet whose performance caught the eye of director Frank Henenlotter, who cast her as the lead in Frankenhooker. In 1987, Tracy Lords was the center of one of Hollywood's biggest scandals after it was revealed she had entered the adult film industry as a minor. And seeking a fresh start, she signed on for her first mainstream role as the nurse who discovers her employer is an alien harvesting human blood to save his dying planet. An emotionless alien named Mr. Johnson uses his hypnotic gaze to vaporize anyone who gets in his way, while Nadine becomes increasingly suspicious of her employer's strange habits and the teleporter in the basement.
I have something I want to show you.
I bet you do.
Below, in the cellar.
Director Jim Wynorski had to fight his own producers to cast her because many considered her radioactive, and Lords took the role for just $20,000 to prove she could actually act. Producer Roger Corman instructed Wynorski to use actual footage from his own 1957 original film for special effects sequences, and what started as a cost-saving mandate turned into an editing philosophy where continuity just stopped mattering. Shot in 12 days on approximately $400,000, the film steals entire sequences from humanoids from the Deep and Hollywood Boulevard, and in the foggy stalker scene, the actress literally changes between shots because finding a matching body double would have cost money they didn't have. Corman's approach to low-budget sci-fi wasn't about hiding limitations, it was about moving so fast audiences wouldn't have time to notice, shooting nearly 10 pages a day with boom mics dipping into frame, and Lords joking that the gore effects looked like someone threw eggs on people's faces because that's essentially what they were. The production was so sloppy that Wynorski's girlfriend Monique Gabrielle ended up playing a bag lady with a tennis racket purely because she was on set that day and they needed an extra body, which is about as clear an example as you will find of Corman's use what you have ethos taken to its logical extreme. Karen Black was a legitimate Oscar nominee who brought unexpected intensity to this low-budget horror comedy about a God-fearing woman famous for award-winning meat pies made from unsuspecting male victims lured by her 4 beautiful nieces. Auntie Lee and her nieces used their beauty and religious fervor to trap sinners and travelers at their remote desert house, slaughtering them for pie filling until a local investigator and suspicious drifter begin poking around. Black treated the role of the cannibalistic baker with the same gravity she would a Shakespearean play, insisting on remaining in character as Auntie Lee even off camera, humming hymns and treating the actresses as if they were her actual subordinates. Pat Morita was struggling to find work that didn't involve playing a wise karate mentor and accepted the role of the local sheriff, specifically because the script let him play a cynical, somewhat incompetent investigator.
I don't know what kind of fertilizer you use, but it sure does get the job done.
The film's climax nearly caused a real-life catastrophe when a crew member accidentally dropped a wet prop into a real commercial deep fryer, causing a massive grease fire that quickly spread to wooden cabinets. Because the budget was so low, there were no professional fire marshals on site, forcing actors to grab fire extinguishers and help put out flames themselves. The production was halted for 2 days to repair the charred kitchen, costing nearly $10,000. That kind of chaos defined how these 11 films got made, a specific moment when cheap video technology, overwhelmed censors, and hungry audiences created a window for genuine weirdness that bigger budgets would have smoothed out entirely.